Kitty Colbert. Good morning, Kitty. How are you?
Good morning. That's
Now, we had a discussion about your name, hadn't we, just before we came in, because I wasn't sure we were going to pronounce it right. Kitty, you're going to talk to us about a campaign that you're involved with to get services for people with a condition known, and help me if I pronounce this wrong, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
That's it. That's how you pronounce it. And there are different pronunciations, but that's how we're going to call it. Yes, that's how we'll call it.
And lots of people just refer to it as EDS.
Yes, for
So
sure.
the campaign you have is #EDS for IRE, or for Ireland.
Yes,
EDS
that's it.
for
EDS for Ireland. Yes.
Okay,
IRE.
listen. Tell us, for people who are listening here now, I have never heard of this before. So you obviously you suffer from the condition yourself. Is
I
that
do.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you tell us what it is and how it affects your daily life?
Yeah. So it's basically a connective tissue disorder, a genetic condition. And it causes faulty collagen, which then in turn causes my joints to partially dislocate and sometimes fully dislocate. So if you think of people that are hypermobile in their joints, you might think of someone who's good at gymnastics, or you might think of someone who's double jointed.
Oh yeah,
but if you
okay.
have,
I was wondering what the hypermobile.
Yeah, so
okay.
if you have that kind of hypermobility in your joints, but you also suffer with pain, then there's an issue there, and so you probably then suffer from either EDS or HSD, and HSD is hypermobility spectrum disorder. So hypermobility is basically seen on a spectrum, and EDS is on one side of the spectrum, and then on the other side is HSD.
Now,
and then there's other types there's a few types of HSD and a few types of EDS.
Okay, you were saying to me before we came back on that they're really two different things, but they're very related. Is that right?
They are, yeah. And the only real way, I suppose, to see that if you have EDS or HSD is to see a qualified rheumatologist who would go through the hypermobility points with you and discuss family history and look at things like your skin, because EDS can also cause very fragile skin. So say it might be quite translucent and you might be quite pale, which obviously a lot of Irish people are, so so you need someone qualified to kind of look at you, and you might scar in an unusual way. You might your skin might get damaged and bruise easily, and might be quite stretchy skin as well.
Okay.
So there's all these pointers then that a qualified rheumatologist can see if you have EDS or if you have HSD.
So listen, this sounds, I say, on a daily basis, people are suffering from this multiple times a day, perhaps.
Yeah, pain would be.
But pain is probably constant.
The pain is constant, and would be, I suppose, the main symptom. My joints will partially dislocate countless times, just from doing small activities. Bigger activities, just from really doing anything. I mean, I could sneeze or cough and put my hand up to my face, and then just even that movement, my fingers can dislocate. So sometimes it can, sometimes I have a good laugh at it, because it's I'll just do a small movement and I scream, and the husband is like, oh my God, what happened now? And but that's just the daily reality, and that's what I've always known.
I'm surprised you're hearing that you can have a laugh about it.
I mean, if
suppose you have to.
If they didn't laugh, you'd cry, I suppose, as they say. And there's.
No, I guess we all remember. I mean, some of us maybe where your knee kind of locks out for a minute. Is that the type of thing you're talking? Is that we can think? I can relate to that.
Yeah.
For example.
I mean, I suppose it would be that maybe times 10, and it would be that at a lot younger age. I mean, you don't expect to feel like a 90-year-old when you're 20, say. It's so I suppose it is that kind of aches and pains, but I suppose it would be a lot worse, I suppose, pain-wise. But then again, if you've had it all your life, you're kind of used to it as well.
Does it limit what you can do, or does it, obviously it does, but I mean, to what extent does it limit
absolutely.
what you can
I mean, I suppose the thing with EDS that I find, the most annoying thing I find, is that I'm disabled, and that's absolutely fine. I've came to terms with that, but I suppose every day is totally different. So I could wake up one day and able to use my legs, and wake up another day and not able to get up at all. I use a wheelchair sometimes. I use a rollator kind of walker instrument in other days, and then like today I'm using crutches because I don't have to walk far. So I suppose that's the annoying thing, is trying to plan day by day.
So there's an uncertainty.
There's an uncertainty. Every day is so different, and I think as a disability, trying to even explain that to people, it's like, actually I can't do that thing today that we'd planned to do because I woke up this morning and I can't get out of bed. That kind of that kind of uncertainty, I think, is the most annoying part.
Now, your campaign obviously is aimed at getting services, and those services, you say, would be equally as important for the people, as a person with EDS, as it is for the hypermobility
spectrum disorder.
Spectrum disorder. Yeah. Sorry, I was looking down at my notes there. So they're equally there. So, what kind of services are lacking? Let's put it this way.
I mean, because it's a genetic condition, it's something you're born with. But early intervention and early diagnosis is so key to conditions like this, to keep up mobility. I didn't have that as a child. I was only diagnosed when I was around 30. I was officially diagnosed, late 20s, early 30s. And that was after I spent my whole 20s trying to get a diagnosis. Now, we knew as a child there was something, very wrong with me. And the doctors kind of put it down to I had untreated hip dysplasia. So I had a lot of pain and issues from that. So they kind of put all my pain down to that. My parents kind of did know. They did all they could at the time. They got me physiotherapy. They tried to seek help, but doctors just said that I was wonky, I was slanted. I never got an official diagnosis. It was just, and they would say there's something wrong with her, but we don't know what it is. And
it's terrible
frankly,
words.
Wonky and slanted. Actual, but that was
really?
Actual, by actual doctors. And because I had physiotherapy and they didn't know I was hypermobile, I ended up having quite bad physiotherapy because if you need someone, a physiotherapist who understands the hypermobile conditions, and that if you overstretch your joints, you're going to dislocate. So the main thing for someone with EDS and HSD is physiotherapy, but it's specialised physio, because
so the wrong kind of physio could cause you problems.
Oh, exactly. I mean, I dislocate so easy as it is. So if I'm going to be stretching, then I'm going to dislocate. Now, the main thing to help dislocations is to try and build up muscle around the joints. That might limit the amount or the severity of dislocations, or sometimes it's full dislocations. It's not always just partial, sometimes full dislocations, but building up the muscle can help that. Now, unfortunately, it's very hard then to exercise and build up the muscle because you're dislocating while it happens. So it's, I do a lot of physio at home. I was lucky enough to eventually, after years, find a physiotherapist who knew a bit about hypermobile conditions. But really, it's a geographical lottery, I suppose, in Ireland, whether or not you can access those services. The other thing as well is early diagnosis. Diagnosis usually by a rheumatologist. Many people with EDS will tell you that you go to a rheumatologist after, maybe 4 years on a waiting list, and they've either never heard of EDS, have heard it, don't really believe it's a health condition, or their ego is too big, then they won't actually say, do you know what, I don't know a lot about this condition. There's a lot of the time they'll say, I don't diagnose EDS. And that's fair enough because they don't know enough about it. And really what we need is trained consultants who do know about it. Now, unfortunately, the HSE, if you ask them, will tell you that all rheumatologists are trained in hypermobile conditions, and that's just not the case. That's not the experience at all from patients.
Now, rheumatologists, generally, we would know them for dealing with people who have arthritis, I suppose, is quite a lot of what they would do, I suppose, or that there. So you're saying that they don't see it, they're not aware of it, they're not as schooled in what the condition entails.
Yeah, many rheumatologists that might have heard of the condition don't know a lot about it. They don't understand that it's a multi-systemic condition. So it's not just our joints, it affects our stomach, it affects anywhere in the body that really have collagen. So it's really say the likes of what they have in London. There's a hypermobility unit there. So there's trained consultants, trained rheumatologists who, can understand the complexity of the conditions. Don't just fob it off and will actually diagnose it. There's also physiotherapists there. There's, a whole team, which in reality is what we need here. But even if we could just get one basic consultant, that's all we would really, that would be a start. That would be something to start with here in Ireland. And there is a couple, I will say, there are a couple of private rheumatologists here in Ireland. Luckily there is. I went with one, Brian Mulcahy in Cork, which I know a lot of people with EDS will know that name. And while he's been over in London himself and has trained with the professionals a bit, but even he will say that he's not an expert. And obviously these appointments are very expensive, if you want to get an assessment for EDS. And then because it's a private consultant, it's not usually taken serious then by any other, by any public doctor.
And it sounds very costly.
Yeah, it's very costly. And then of course it's seen as that you've paid for a diagnosis, or it's just not taken seriously because they're not appointed. They're not appointed by the HSE. So it's kind of like, they don't really count, that kind of attitude. I'm also aware that there's one in a consultant now in Dublin as well that's taking on cases. But again, then if you present with that later saying, well, I was diagnosed by such and such, people are just like, oh, who? And they're very dismissive. I find, other doctors then can be very dismissive of your diagnosis.
Okay.
So then the other option then for a lot of people is to go to the hypermobility unit in London, which I did myself. I went to Cork originally. And on that suggestion, it was, you should go to London eventually and have further testing and further consultation there. And I eventually did that. And I actually needed an upright MRI, which is something Ireland also doesn't have. We don't have that here. A lot of people with EDS need an upright MRI compared to a normal MRI to diagnose and to monitor certain conditions like chiari malformation, and neck instability, which a lot of people with EDS have some degree of, and those conditions aren't often seen in a normal MRI. So that's another issue that Ireland has compared to other countries.
I take it from that you mean the MRI is done while you're standing.
Well, you're in a sitting, standing position, and you're doing certain movements. So you're putting your spine, I suppose, under pressure, so they can see more of what is actually happening. So my MRIs here in Ireland, for instance, were absolutely normal, nothing too worrying, and nothing too out of the ordinary.
Because there's no stress on your back.
Because there's no stress, exactly. And then the consultant in London suggested that I have the upright MRI there, which was very expensive, and I had to, my friends actually had to do a fundraiser for me, which is very common with EDS. We either have to, you can only get things like the treatment abroad scheme if you first can prove that their services aren't here in Ireland, that they don't exist here, and then secondly, they don't cover private clinics in the UK, which unfortunately the hypermobility unit in London is a private clinic, and so is the upright MRI. So it's me pages. I mean, it's disgusting, but it's kind of like second nature to us now. It's ridiculous that it has to be done and that it's so common. So
we were talking earlier too, it's hard to say how many people suffer from the condition, is that correct?
Yeah.
You don't have the stats that back it up really?
I suppose internationally they say that it's 1 in every 5,000 to 10,000 people, depending on the type of EDS you have. There's 13 types of EDS. Hypermobility type is the most common type, and that's the form I have, although I'm waiting for genetic testing just to rule out the other types. Which obviously is another issue for people, wait on waiting lists. But that's what they say internationally. It's about 1 in 5,000 to 1 in 10,000. The thing is, though, if you ask if anyone in the within the HSE, what are the stats here in Ireland? There are no official stats, and I've heard ridiculous numbers like that. There's only 25 people in the country with EDS. Now that is just not true in the slightest, and it's something we always laugh at as as a community.
1 in 5,000, obviously that couldn't be true.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely ridiculous. On my website, www.eds4iore.ie, I actually have a poll on there for anyone that has EDS or HSD, just to try to get some unofficial stats. I have about 200 people on that at the moment. I need to promote that more, but I mean, I know even just from online support groups that there's, and that's only on Facebook, online support groups, so not everyone's on there, that there's probably about 1,000 or so at least people. As I was saying, there's 13 types of EDS. The hypermobility type is the most common type, and even though EDS is usually seen as a rare disorder, the hypermobility type is very much on the cusp of being rare. It's the most common type, and it's, as we say in the community, it's not rare, it's rarely diagnosed.
Yeah. Now you were saying as well, that you say you have 1,000 people already, and I presume there's a fairly even geographic spread.
Yeah, I mean, you'll find probably that you'll get talking to more people from the city, say, but that's just because they've more aware and have got more of a diagnosis, I suppose, than in smaller communities and in towns and villages, so it's it's really about, I mean, there's so many people are probably out there that have the condition.
And you mentioned genetic testing, so it is obviously then genetically inherited.
They've only pinpointed the genes for a few of the types of EDS. Research is still very much ongoing, mostly in the US, obviously, and they haven't pinpointed the exact genes yet, the mutation yet for the hypermobility type. So that's usually diagnosed with clinical findings. So they'll go through the hypermobility points with you, and then go through obviously a medical history and things like that. And we've all got, I suppose, kind of the same story of been in pain all our lives, was told that it was growing pains, and absolutely ridiculous things like that. didn't scar very well, we've trademark scars on us and things like that. So the hypermobility type is, generally diagnosed like that, but everyone should get the genetic testing to make sure they don't have, say, the vascular type, which, is the more serious type of ADS.
I was going to say, so then the hereditary one, it's likely that somebody would have come across this before, I'm saying, in their family somewhere.
Yeah.
So new cases out of the blue, there is the possibility
there's
of
a possibility of new cases out of the blue. I mean, with any, with a lot
there
of
can always be a
conditions.
mutation of a gene anyway.
Yes. So there's just mutations randomly sometimes, and sometimes people don't know what to look for in family history. So for instance, I'm pretty sure I got it from my dad's side of the family. My dad used to always quite be in pain and stuff, and I suppose just as a man, he never really discussed it. So unfortunately, he passed on a few years ago. So I've never pushed the issue with him. But definitely on his side of the family, I have a lot of hypermobile relatives. I knew I had one or two, and I actually put up a Facebook status there a couple of years ago, I'm just wondering, is there anyone else in the family? And everyone started commenting, particularly women. It's a far more common condition in women. So you might notice the women in your family have pain issues and have always been a bit bendier maybe than the general population. So once I started to explore things, I kind of found out and I kind of knew there was a bit of hypermobility there, but people, I suppose, don't necessarily know what to look out for because your family members mightn't be diagnosed. Okay.
So how can people support your campaign or get in touch with you if you think they have an issue, or how can they find out more about it?
I have a website, so it's eds4ire.ie, and if you go to that, you can sign the petition. That's the main thing. Please sign the petition. If you think you have EDS or HSD, or if you're worried about your child or anything, then you can contact me on there. We're on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter obviously as well. If you have EDS or HSD, you can take the poll on the website, just because we are trying to get more stats. Also, we've had a gathering recently outside the Dáil. We're planning to have another one on the 12th, I think it's Wednesday the 12th of June. If you like our Facebook page, EDS4IRE, and you'll find it all on the website, then you can keep up to date with all the events. I've been running just meetups as well for patients or for people who feel they're diagnosed, so you can come to them if you're concerned about anything, or feel free to send me an email.
Okay, that's great. So your #EDS4IRE campaign, just to bring the people in, there's information out there, and they can always get in touch with you if you need some more and support, I take it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, we get a lot of questions to the Facebook page in particular, so if anyone has any questions. Okay,
listen, Kitty Culbert, thank you very much for coming in and talking to us today about a very important topic, and we wish you well in your efforts.
Thanks so much.